Hey everybody, welcome to, tips for painting and also just going through my own experience and trying to be as curious as I can to beginners. um, for the first half of this, I will be basically going over my process, and the first tester drawing we'll be doing is Yogi Bear. Partially just as a tester, and I'll do a proper Yogi Bear print later on, but just to give you a idea of my process and what I do. This is not like a way of saying my way is the best way, but just giving you guys an idea. If you guys want to learn to draw, you can maybe take notes if you want. In no way am I saying this is the correct way to do it, but yeah. So the crux of how I draw is basically most of the time I rely in my head as a blueprint, using reference, using the shapes as you can see, ovals, triangles, squares, getting the rough idea of the character down as like a thumbnail or basically just the proportions and the crux of the character, the form of it, before I do anything else. Getting the line work done is usually key, so always start in pencil, or as you can see what I'm doing. Personally, I love painting. It's one of my personal favorites, medias, but no shame if you do not like it or it's not something you're into. It's personally a preference thing. I love it, but hey, no shame to you if you don't. Find the medium that works best for you and stuff like that. So, as you'll be seeing throughout the video, I'll try to go through my process, trying not to overcomplicate things too much. But yeah. So, as you see, mostly just starting out with the head, because that's the crux of things. That's how I usually start stuff, is the eyes or the head. And always start in a pencil, not an ink. That's just personally my first tip for you guys. Personally, the second tip I have is study your reference. If you are drawing from your mind's eye, that's great as well. But if you're drawing a character, make sure you have a reference. And always start in pencil because it's easier to erase. And it's a lot easier to get the forms down like you'd be seeing on screen. Because Yogi is a very interesting, just very simple character, mostly relying on ovals and rectangles and very simple shapes. If you want to start with the old school classic cartoons to get a feel for your drawing, and that's something that's really easy. Just go get the shapes down first, study a reference, draw from it. Don't trace it. Don't always rely on tracing. It's a good way to get sued. But have that idea of what you're trying to draw first. Thumbnail it, do a mini sketch. That's the first tip I have. Is always try do a mini sketch first, get an idea of what you're wanting to draw. Make sure you have the form and the proportions down, and the anatomy is kind of key. I don't really use a whole lot of it, but yeah. So here is where I'm going to break down the form is, in a way, without doing too much. So the form is simply a rectangle for the top, rectangle for a bit of the side, 2 ovals for the eyes, but you can space them out if you want. Just giving you like the anatomy in my head. Circle for the head, small circle for the ear, 2 rectangles for like the tie bits, oval for the body, triangle for the waist, cylinders for the legs, and the feet were kind of like, as you'll be seeing. That's pretty much breaking down the anatomy in my head. Now, you don't have to draw it always anatomy the way artists do, just giving you a crux idea of how I personally do things. So make sure you know your shapes. So like the cylinder is for mostly wrists, legs, joints. The sphere and all the other shapes, triangle, they all come in handy very muchly. So keep these in mind when you're drawing. Like if you want to do like a rough layout, get those proportions down, use your shapes to your advantage. And also study, like if you're drawing people, take time to draw one part of the body first. So like there's different ways to draw eyes, like you'll be seeing. You can do very cartoony, very realistic, very, just different in general. Like there's thousands of ways to draw certain stuff. Like here's a simple philosophy when you're doing art. Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. you can just try doing it different ways. There's thousands of ways to do eyes, from cartoony to realistic. You can do them thousands of ways. The same could be said for noses. You can just do a straight line and a curve, or you can do a miniature circle, and you can rely on reference, like doing Leon here, how I did that painting. With the nose, you basically can do minor, just do that little circle there. And then you can go from the side, and then you just do a little bit of an up, and then a little bit of a down. So you can basically try out different styles to get your different body things right. So noses are very tricky. There's thousands of ways to do them. Anime style noses, cartoony noses, animal type noses. They're always different, always unique, very difficult. So keep that in mind. So yeah, just like study references, try different ways to do them. And also with painting, I always use a reference, like you see for the scorpion. Notice how the shading and also the eyes are very close, and also just everything in general. Using those references are key to get some stuff right. With this one, I used a bit of a primer pencil for some of the shading before painting. As you see, using the watercolor palette. For some drawings, I make sure things are different. Always have water if you're using watercolor. If you're using different other paints, different methods are different, so keep that in mind. So like having like the crux of what your characters, shade and what the colors are mainly for them is key. So for Scorpion, it's yellow. So adding a very dirty, very interesting yellow is key. So you can basically do like a crux. So understanding the colors and the value, like right in here, it's very difficult. So understanding color is the main thing. So basically, Understanding what the crux of your character's color palette in a simple thing and shading is always key. So first, and especially understanding your paintbrushes, like the different, if it's like smaller, it's more for tightness, detail work. If it's, and also understanding that the lighter it can go for the less water you have in the brush. So you can go lighter. So the less paint in the brush is the lighter it can be. The more paint is the darker. You can have like a medium, and the less you use, the lighter it'll get. And the most paint you can have, it'll be extremely dark. So you can work in a very tight-knit facet. So light, medium, dark. Very simple, very interesting, especially with painting or just drawing in general with using markers. Having that crux there. So you can work in layers. That's what I do. Work in those layers and refine and go more opaque as, you go along. Layers are very key, especially with painting. Working in layers when it comes to coloring, basically with paint, like even this Nero drawing, or for instance, let's see, Alan Wake here, layers are key. Leon, same thing, working in layers. Springtrap, Dante, all of them, I worked in layers and painted and refined those details, especially in Scorpion's case here. Notice how the mask and the face, there's like little details, like a bit of brown, little bit of stuff. Using like color pencils sometimes can be helpful. Or using like, primer color pencils, or just in general especially using watercolor paper is extremely key. Do not use regular stuff. It's not very helpful. So use that. Heavily use, if you're wanting to do paint, use watercolor paper. It is made for it. So yeah. Also with primer color pencils, little demonstration, something that'll help you with painting if you're into the idea. Do like a little test here. If you just work in layers, you can paint over it, and it kind of glosses and kind of darkens the actual paint, and it can work in shades, so you can layer. So notice how I go off of the paint, it kind of dries up a little bit, becomes more lighter compared to where I did the color pencil there. But then if I go a little bit more, it kind of, the color pencil still stays, but the paint can run off, and lighten some areas. You can also have the same effect with oil markers. Oil markers are very helpful, extremely key. They can really be great. If you're wanting to use paint, you have these. These are waterproof. You can do for line work. These Japanese or Chinese style waterproof ink pens. Check out Scott Christensen Salva. He did a short covering these. Also, understanding your brush tips is key, keeping these in good shape. I have the biggest problem of trying to do that, but, be better than the sum of your parts. Each one is different, thickness-wise, so you can use them for different styles, different stuff. Flat, curved, big, small, all that stuff in general. Also, if you're working with watercolor, you have like a palette you can use. So understanding like each brush has a different style to it. So like a flat one works from right, you can work from right to left or up to down. And it has a different style to it compared to something you would see, like for instance, let's say Yogi Bear here. Let's do a little bit of line work and then try doing a little bit of paint. So what I'll do here is I'll do a little inking. So waterproof ink comes in handy from these pens. So I'll do the arm here, and I will do a little bit of the waistline, and I'm not going to do all of it because that would be insane. Make sure you always have a reference key so you can understand where to put your shade, where to put your values, your color. So I'm going to do like a little bit of a line work right here as a demonstration. And I'll do a proper Yogi Bear thing maybe in a little while, maybe. So here's the drill. So what you can do, also make sure with your color, your penciling, you can't probably see it. That tip, like the graphite, they work in scales. So if you want to work really light to dark, especially in your penciling stage, so here's a better one. An H6, that would be really light, so hard graphite, compared to a B, which is darker. Which probably you guys already know that, but still. So let's cut to the chase. Hold on. Okay, so what I'll do here is I'll give you a demonstration. You can work really light. It can be very runny. Make sure sometimes you can do almost light to dark, dark to light. Understand your values, what you're trying to achieve. Like, have it mentally prepared. So I went real light, so you can go more opaque, as I'm about to do, with a different color. And that kind of changes the value just a little bit from that dark, very light brown to like a more lighter but yellowish brown right here. And then I'll use like a dried gouache that is a more darker brown. Right here, yeah. And you will basically notice how different you can blend those colors together a little bit, and blending can be key. Just knowing when to blend is extremely difficult with painting, color pencils, oil markers in general. Just knowing that value and like where to paint and darken, so like you can go darker, as I'm about to do. And like wait for things to dry sometimes is key. It can really be helpful. Understanding where and when to go light and dark, shading. This is more like just a rough, so excuse its roughness. But yeah, like you go real light to dark as you go along, so that's where the arm is, so it goes darker a little bit as you get to the top. It's supposed to, but I'm kind of just doing like a little bit more from the side. So as you would have that triangle area between his arm and his waist, you would have like shade there. So you can go little lighter to the foot with the shading as well. So painting can be very interesting, as you see. Like Princess Peach here, I always use reference, like with any of my, paintings, making sure I have like the good enough reference to do some of these. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Sorry if things were not very little complicated, but yeah, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. And till next time, guys, peace out and bye-bye.